Ever ponder whether something as harmless as a Christmas star could conceal something? Dark secrets. A few years ago, in a quiet neighborhood in a typical town, the Grant family was getting ready to celebrate the holidays by decorating their home with bright lights, reindeer figures, and of course, a huge Christmas tree. However, this time something was different. There was a special star to place on top of the tree. It was an old piece of golden metal that shimmered even when it wasn't lit up, and no one knew where it came from. But its presence seemed to fill the room with a strange energy that caused the children, especially Emily and her younger brother David, to stare at it incessantly. The family had purchased this star from a small antique store, but the shopkeeper, a strange man with unsettling eyes, had warned them almost in a whisper not to look at it for too long. At first they thought it was just some old superstition. After all, what could a Christmas star do other than sit on top of a tree shining brightly? But what happened that night changed everything forever. While the family was enjoying a quiet dinner, Emily, the oldest child, got up to look for something in the kitchen. At that moment, David, who had always been a curious child, chose to approach the star, his eyes fixed on it as if he were hypnotized. It was as if something, an invisible force, was compelling him to look at it without breaking his gaze. David seemed to be oblivious to the passing of the minutes, as though it were absorbing the light from all around it. The star's golden brilliance seemed to get brighter by the second. Emily saw her brother standing motionless, almost like a statue, his eyes fixed on the star as she came back from the kitchen. Initially, she wanted to call out to him, but she had a strong feeling that she shouldn't. As she slowly drew closer, she noticed something that stopped her cold. A subtle wave seemed to come from the air surrounding the star, and the star itself looked to quiver slightly. Emily sensed that something was seriously wrong when she felt pressure in her chest. It was then that David screamed softly, and his body started to shake. Terribly frightened, Emily rushed to him in an attempt to hold him, but her brother appeared to be trapped in an unseen force that was holding him motionless and absorbing him. She had to work very hard to pull him away, but what she saw in David's eyes, which were normally full of life, made her freeze in fear. It seemed as though something had taken his soul. The boy was there, yes, but his essence had been trapped somewhere, possibly in another dimension. Fear-struck, Emily attempted to rouse her brother in the same way that one might rouse a child from a deep slumber, but she received no reaction. The house's atmosphere grew tight, frantic, and imbued with a foreboding presence as the star continued to blaze brilliantly. Every time Emily attempted to move away from the star, she felt as though something was drawing her back, making her turn around. A faint, hardly perceptible whisper that seemed to emanate from the star itself started to permeate the room. It was a faint murmur, a faraway tune. She heard a voice calling to her. Emily put her hands over her ears and closed her eyes, but the music continued. When she realized the star wasn't just devouring her brother, but also beckoning to her and drawing her into something much darker, the pressure in her chest increased, and she was overcome with panic. It appeared that wherever she ran, she would always come to the same spot in the house. The Christmas tree. The star remained. The house grew colder, and the darkness grew stronger every second, captivating her with something that appeared to emanate from within. She was aware that she would become another victim if she couldn't figure out how to eliminate it. A tattered note tucked away between the pages of an old book was the only hint Emily could find after spending hours going through the family's possessions and the things they had purchased from the antique store. The letter described an odd relic, a star that had been created to serve as a portal to a different dimension, one in which lost souls would be imprisoned indefinitely, in addition to being a decorative element. Emily realized what had happened as she read those lines. Anyone who gazed at the star for too long would be drawn into its brightness and imprisoned in that alternate reality for all time. It was more than simply a decorative element. As Emily considered her alternatives, time seemed to stand still. The letter contained an important detail. The only way to close the gateway was to destroy the star, but it had to be done before the soul of whoever glanced at it totally vanished. She didn't have much time before the star would draw her in as well. Emily made the decision to take quick action. It seems like the star had been waiting for the ideal opportunity to use all of its strength. It was going to capture its last prize, and the Grant family had been its last victims. Emily went to the star with the note and a hammer she had discovered in the shed. The whispers increased in volume as she went along, becoming nearly intolerable, but there was no going back now. The star broke apart with a swift, forceful blow, producing a dazzling light that seemed to erase everything in her immediate vicinity. Emily was the only person in the room when the light went out. The house appeared to be calmer now that the star was gone. A short while later, David, who had been in a catatonic state, awoke as though he had been sleeping deeply, but something had changed in him. A shadow appeared in his eyes as if something from that parallel dimension was still pursuing him. While Emily was aware that the star was no longer there, she also realized that the darkness it had brought into the house that night could not be completely contained. Remember what happened to the Grant family if you ever see a star that beckons, captivates, and draws you in with its radiance. The next story. Ever pondered what would happen if you ended up stuck in a place where time seems to have stopped and the ghosts of the past might be heard whispering in the darkness? In order to celebrate New Year's Eve, a group of friends decide to take a road trip that takes them to a place they never would have thought to visit. The thrill and delight of exploration will quickly transform into a horrifying encounter when they unintentionally enter a deserted village whose residents are spirits trapped in a never-ending cycle. Get ready to explore the final adventure, when the supernatural and reality converge in unnerving ways. Everything started when 5 friends, Mark, Sarah, Alex, Laura, and Jake, made the decision to abandon their boring lives and take a road trip to the coast on a cold December morning. They were filled with zest and vitality as they listened to music and laughed loudly from the speakers. But as they drove farther out of the city, the scenery drastically changed. Trees became scarce and the roads became uncannily silent. At that point, they noticed a weathered sign directing them to a town called Eldritch, and intrigued by its ancient and enigmatic appearance, they chose to veer off their usual course. When they first arrived, they saw lonely houses covered in weeds, deserted streets, and an eerie silence that seemed to permeate everything. However, what really got to them was the uncanny sense that they were being watched as they explored the town and noticed unsettling details like faded photos on the walls with pale faces and empty stares, as well as the sound of distant laughter echoing in the cold air. They were unaware that they were about to cross a line from which they would never return, and as the sun started to set behind the mountains, the friends made the decision to seek refuge. They sought shelter from the cold in an old tavern. The interior was as dusty as the outside, but it had a spooky charm that drew them in. There was an odd energy in the air that seemed to vibrate with every word that was whispered. It was there that they met Harold, an elderly man who told them stories about Eldred and its former residents. As Harold told them these stories, the atmosphere grew heavier, and the friends' hearts began to race as they heard tales of that fateful night when everyone in the town became caught in an unending cycle. According to Harold, every year on New Year's Eve, their souls, as he spoke, flickering lights created menacing shadows around them, and Rel spent their final night on Earth, unable to escape the agony of their own memories. Friends exchanged anxious looks, sensing that someone was seeing them. Not just Haral, but something far more sinister lurking in the dark, determined not to succumb to fear. The friends continued exploring Eldred after bidding farewell to Harold. However, it soon became clear that something was. A mist shadow seemed to move with a life of their own, and echoes of the past grew louder with each step they took. As night fell completely, they began hearing distant murmur, childlike laughter mingled with muffled screams. When they tried to find their way out of the ghost town, they realized that the streets appeared to shift before their eyes. Every turn led them back to familiar, yet distorted places. Eventually, they arrived at a central square dominated by an ancient clock whose hands were frozen at midnight. In that moment of realization came a chilling understanding they were ensnared in the very cycle Harold had described. Fear gripped them as spectral figures began materializing from the shadows, lost inhabitants of Eldritch, condemned to relive their last celebration. Without hope for redemption, the friends attempted to flee toward the outskirts of town, but found each effort only led them back to that same square. In the midst of this emotional and physical chaos, fear increased when they realized that not only were they physically trapped, but that their own memories were also fading, as those lost souls exerted influence over their thoughts. One of them, Laura, remembered something important. If they could find out what had caused the town's curse and help free those tormented souls before midnight struck again, perhaps they could break free from this cycle themselves. They started looking for clues among the ruins, finding abandoned personal belongings and old photographs that reveal fragments of tragic stories of lost loves, broken promises, and dark secrets that had held Eldritch captive for centuries. As they unearthed these hidden truths, spectral manifestations intensified, and some seemed grateful. Some were desperate and angry, but the friends understood that in order to help those trapped spirits find peace, they had to face their own regrets and concerns. They made the bold but desperate decision to plan a celebration of sorts in order to honor everything that had previously been lovely about Eldritch. With each beam of light rising from those fires, candles flared against the encroaching darkness, and joyful music reverberated through the ruins. Changes became apparent. Some ghosts started to smile, while others shed silent tears. However, just when it appeared that significant progress was being made, the clock, a loud chime, struck midnight. Shadows reddened violently as a dark figure appeared among them. It was the tormented spirit of Eldridge's former mayor, who had been responsible for sealing their tragic fate. The mayor glared at them with hateful eyes and spoke incomprehensible words, and friends felt his negative energy slowly consuming them. However, Laura had the courage to step forward and declare, "We are not here to judge or blame you. We have come to remember what was beautiful about this place." Her words resonated powerfully among all present in that magical moment where past and present collided. Something extraordinary happened. Spirits began glowing brightly as they joined hands, forming a circle around the mayor, with tears streaming down their cheeks and hearts beating in unison, filled with renewed hope. Everyone felt how this connection transcended physicality. It was as if every painful memory began dissolving before the power of shared love, ultimately grasping what truly mattered. Although they'd originally set out seeking fun together for New Year's Eve celebration, they discovered much more. They'd uncovered true meaning behind unconditional love, capable even breaking into visible chains tied tightly around past mistakes. When everything concluded and souls finally found peace after centuries, ensnared within this eternal cycle, friends felt warm light enveloping them before slowly fading away alongside Eldridge, leaving only blurred but unforgettable memories etched deep within hearts as they returned down familiar roads toward home. Under starlit skies filled with renewed hope, vow never forget experiences shared during this year's end, nor let fear dictate future choices, because now knew there would always be light even amidst darkest storms. If you liked this story as much as we did when we shared it, please remember to hit the like button below and leave a remark or your thoughts about the previous adventure. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so that we may continue our exploration together. Stories like this one are chilling,